doctor. I see you now. I don't know if you know Natasha. You know, she's from Sydney. It could be a big, it's not that big of a place. Okay, just saying. Okay, I need to get to know each other later. How much time, please? How much time? Okay, May 13th to get that. So you can see the old trading cards, yeah, coming out. That's good. Yeah, it's Sunnyvale, California. You like those?
Yes. It's such a wonderful opportunity. I'm thrilled.
1 minute.
Yeah, I like that energy. She's good. Okay, go and practice our applause one more time. 1, 2, 3, let's hear you. 45 seconds. Okay, good. It's alive. It's good. And we'll have real-time commercial breaks, so we'll have a little time to go there. That's fun. Do you have a favorite trader? Gayadami. Wow, it's bold. Anyone else? You can hear us. K-Fine. Listen to this one. You're cozy. You know her? Okay. Okay, good. I know Sabrina brought Karen's book with her, and that was nice. She's going to sign that for you later. That's very nice.
15.
That's good. Okay, 15 seconds. All right, so that's good. You guys okay back there? Okay, good. Hi, May. Okay, good. Hi, Amanda. Okay, good. All right, we're going to sit up nice and straight. Here we go. Count us down. 4, 3, 2, 1.
Awesome, awesome.
Talking on Tesla today, the ripple effect on the markets and how this DC divorce could derail Trump's tax bill. One of the latest from Washington Plus, we're joined by former Trump NEC Director and current IB Vice Chair Gary Cohn to break it all down. Then a market warning, Marco Kalanovic will join us in his first TV interview since leaving JP Morgan, while he thinks stocks are about to see a pullback and how you should position yourself right now. And later, earnings from Broadcom and Lululemon, stablecoin issuer Circle with a monster market debut. And you've got questions, we've got answers. The traders take on our fans' burning questions live. I'm Melissa Lee coming to you live from Studio B at the NASDAQ. On the desk tonight, Tim Seymour, Karen Finerman, Dan Nathan, and Guy Adami. Great night, great audience that we have. The energy in the room is awesome.
I mean, I tell you.
We've got to get back to that social media smackdown between President Trump and Elon Musk. The two men trading insults over the course of the afternoon. Just in the last hour, the Tesla CEO saying on X that Trump's tariffs will cause a recession in the second half of the year, and agreeing with the Post calling for the president to be impeached and replaced by J.D. Vance. Just went crazy and threatened to axe the Tesla CEO's government contracts. That, of course, in response to Musk taking credit for Trump's election win. Tesla shares plunged as the feud escalated, the stock dropping nearly 18% at its lows, shedding $150 billion in market cap on the session. That's its biggest one-day loss ever. Shares down further in the after-hours session. The broader markets whipsaw too. The S&P 500 finishing the day down 0.5%. For more on the war of words between Trump and Musk, let's bring in Eamon Javers, who's at the White House. Eamon.
You know, Melissa, I do this for a living, and even I am just kind of out of words to describe what's happening here. I mean, it's just an epic meltdown between the most powerful man in the world and the richest man in the world. And as you say, we saw Elon Musk tweeting out just a short time ago that Trump's tariffs are going to cause a recession in the second half of the year. So that's Elon taking on Trump's most important economic move of the year. Then he moves on to the president's most important legislative move of the year, which is his big, beautiful spending bill up on Capitol Hill. Elon Musk saying that's a disaster and urging people to kill the bill. And then Elon taking on Donald Trump as a man, just a human being, saying that he's in the Epstein files and retweeting over the past 20 minutes or so video of Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein, the longtime convicted pedophile, The astonishing nature of that is just sort of beyond my ability to put into words right now. It's an astonishing thing. The president, seeming befuddled by all of this, earlier in the day, he was in the Oval Office. He was meeting with the Chancellor of Germany, and he said, "Look, we had a great relationship. I don't know if we're going to have a great relationship going forward." And he sort of reminisced about last week when Elon Musk was in the Oval Office with the president. They're both heaping praise on each other, and Trump even said at one point, Elon Musk had a black eye, and I offered to get him some makeup to help him. And he said, no, I don't need any makeup. Trump seemed a little befuddled by that too. All of this has just enormous implications for Elon Musk's businesses, for the future of the Republican Party, for technology, for cryptocurrency. You can go on and on and on about all the ways this can rupture relationships around the conservative movement, the crypto movement, the tech movement, all of it at stake now, as Steve Bannon, the outside Republican advisor to President Trump, is now encouraging President Trump to investigate Elon Musk as an illegal alien, suggesting that he needs to be deported.
What a day to be here.
Where this can go is anybody's guess from here, Melissa, but it has been a wild ride here at the White House today.
We are somewhat out of words too for this, Eamon. It's been a remarkable afternoon in terms of the war of words. Thank you so much, Eamon Javers, with the latest from the White House. Let's get more on the impact on Tesla. Phil LeBeau joins us with that now. Phil.
And Melissa, the one post that I want to focus on from the president that really should catch the most attention with Tesla investors, it's this one. It has to do with the government subsidies that Tesla receives. The easiest way to save money in our budget, billions and billions of dollars, is to terminate Elon's governmental subsidies and contracts. I was always surprised that Biden didn't do it. The reason I'm showing you this, Melissa, is not because of the subsidies that Tesla may be receiving, whether you talk about the EV credits, et cetera. It's the fact that Trump can make life a living hell for Tesla investors. How? Look at all of the agencies, and this is just a few of the primary ones that have some form of regulation over businesses that are core to Tesla, to SpaceX, to Elon Musk. NHTSA oversees regulation of robotaxis, autonomous vehicle regulations. The FAA is in charge of SpaceX rocket launches. NASA has a huge say in terms of SpaceX missions, whether you're talking about the International Space Station, whether you're talking about missions to Mars eventually. And then the FCC has regulation over Starlink. Now, you might be looking at this and saying, well, yes, theoretically they have regulation over this, but how much could that really impact Tesla? It could be incredibly problematic. We're not saying that's going to happen, but remember, next week we have the robotaxi launch. If you want to go to war with the president, Melissa, ask the people at Harvard how that goes. He will continue to battle, and he will raise the stakes. So that's the thing that investors of Tesla have to be watching at this point.
Absolutely. Phil, thank you. Phil LeBeau. And by the way, Musk said, go ahead and make my day when it came to that tweet. So that's, another concern for investors. Where do you want to go here? There's a lot.
I think the broader market is where we go first. Dan and everybody can talk about Tesla, but we were having this conversation before the show. What does this mean for the bond market? Is it bond bullish or bond negative? I will tell you, in terms of the U.S. dollar, I think it's absolutely dollar negative. So therefore, I have to think at some point it's broader market negative. Now, if the bond market rallies on this, that's probably what a lot of people want in the first place. But if you see a soften in the bond market and a subsequent weakness in the dollar, this is what we've seen before. It's not market friendly.
I mean, in terms of, if tariffs are delayed because of all the negotiations that are going on now, if tax is delayed, if all these feasible. Right.
That's all dollar positive. Guys, right. I mean, we've had these days where we've seen the dollar, we've seen bonds, we've seen stocks all go down the same day. We've said, this is what happens in emerging markets. The political circus here is something that doesn't help, whether that's something that we fall through. And I think the more important part of this is I do think that this has emboldened, and this is not a political show. No one cares about my politics. I'll just say that this stand-up actually could bring some folks on the GOP to at least be more bold to come forward and push back on a bill. Where does that put? What does that do for the bond market? What does that do for the dollar? I think it's bond positive. I ultimately think that if you derail a lot of this policy and you get in at least some sense that this president has a little less power, you're going to see a little more of a flight to quality. And it's so early here. But I do think that if you think about where this administration was very clear, they wanted lower interest rates, and I don't know how they were going to get there necessarily, but they definitely wanted a lower dollar, and they had gotten that. And we were actually, look, at 98, you've probably broken some key levels, but the dollar was holding up. Let's watch it.
You got the popcorn.
Oh,
yeah.
sorry, wait, is it my turn?
I mean, let's be clear. And, we can go to tax, you can go to dollar this, you can go to rates or, debt ratings and whatever.
At the end of the day, the conflicts of interest that Elon Musk has, it's not just here domestically. It's not just the fear of regulation. And it's not just the fact that he's the richest man in the world worth hundreds of billions of dollars. Think about where his manufacturing bases are. In China, in Shanghai, right? The cars that they make in Shanghai, which they're not selling a whole heck of a lot in China anymore, they go to Europe. We have all this tariff stuff going on. Think about the importance of Starlink and all of these sorts of situations, whether it's with Ukraine and Russia. Think about the fact that Elon Musk last year had communications with President Putin, right? So if this is going to hell in a handbasket right here, and we've never seen anything like this, I think there are broader geopolitical implications of all this, and I do not think they should be discounted. At the end of the day, you look at these two men of this great amount of power, and you say to yourself, whose interest do they have in mind? Do they have our country's interest in mind, or their own self-interest in mind? And I think that's what's really disappointing about this, because this is not going to end here and now, today. Tweet wars like this, that's one thing. But the other sorts of wars of influence, those things could go on for a while, and they chip away at this whole idea of American exceptionalism.
So, there's a lot, you can make a lot of different arguments. To me, what I think is that if this tax part of the bill is threatened, that has been a source of, I think, a lot of the rally in the last couple of months. Obviously, we had the tariff, pause, that too, but that is sort of an important underpinning of their plan, right? Make sure this tax plan is more permanent or permanent. So if that's threatened, that's one. You could also make the argument, though, that they're going to be able to get rid of a lot of pork, right? That maybe when they relook at this bill, that they know they got to get it done, and they won't. Maybe it'll be a different bill, which will be less of a deficit. What?
Karen's just the pork term.
Why not use the pork term?
It's perfect.
Tons of pork, yes.
But the runway to tax just got longer. And for that reason, that's market negative. Whatever the bull case was in terms of the back half of the year, we're going to see developments on trade. We're going to have a bunch of deals done. We're going to have tax done, and it's going to pave the way for the rally in the back half. That's a longer runway now. We're going to wait a little longer for that.
I believe so. And if the market had been rallying on the back of that solely, it's fair to think that we get most of it, if not the entirety of it back. And again, we've talked about the volatility index. I think it becomes in play yet again. This 18, 17, 18 level, which was resistance forever, has now become support.
For more on the markets and the Trump administration's economic policies, let's bring in Gary Cohn, Vice Chair of IBM. He served as Director of the National Economic Council during the first Trump administration and has What do you make of all of this?
Well, first of all, I would not overreact on it. If we learned one thing over the Trump administration, this is a few hours. The world could be completely different a week from now. So I understand everyone reacting to what we've seen today, and I understand that we're all market driven, but this could change. It could change overnight, it could change next week. And in the middle of this, I think we all missed that the president announced a trade deal with China, which is probably pretty bullish for the markets as well. So it's not like the White House is sitting there only worried about the Elon Musk situation. They're driving business forward, and they're trying to deliver on their economic promises.
Couple things. Gary could be anywhere right now. I'm sure his phone is blowing up. He chose to be with us. He committed this a couple months ago. He's here with us now. Gary's an absolute gentleman, number one. Number two, I ask you, in terms of tax, you sat in that seat for a long time. Mel made the point. I guess both, you said it to me earlier, they both want the same thing. They're just getting at it in a different way. So sort of speak to that.
Exactly. So look, let's take a step back and take the temperature down for a minute. It is an absolute imperative that we roll over or continue the Trump tax cuts that were put in place in 2017. The implications of not rolling them back and going back to where we were in 2017, we haven't talked about that. But the negative impact on the economy and the markets would be close to catastrophic. I don't think anyone's prepared for that. None of you have talked about it. No one is talking about not rolling over the Trump tax cuts. What's in there for businesses on the accelerated depreciation, on the R&D, making interest deduction, making these things permanent, this is really important for the economy. So I don't really think Congress has a choice. And then you can throw in border security and other things in the bill. I think the vast majority of us want a secured border. So these things are going to happen. How we get there, I don't know. As you said, I was part of it when they did it, eight years ago. It's never clean. It's messy getting legislation done, and it's a lot of compromises. But at the end of the day, we'll get to the compromises to continue the Trump tax cut and roll them forward. When you look at the deficit piece of the equation, which is what the argument's about today, the deficit in the bill is coming from rolling over the tax cuts. That's what's driving the deficit. It's not additional spending. Yes, there's some spending in there for the border, but the driver of the deficit is the tax cuts. And that's because this arcane way that we score things in the United States. We send it to the Congressional Budget Office, they score it, they statically score it. They say no matter what you do in the tax bill, it has no effect on the economy. Whether you increase taxes, you decrease taxes, you end taxes, you take them to 100%, it will have no economic effect. We know that's wrong. The status scoring came up with this $2.4 trillion loss over 10 years. If you go back to where we were in 2017, our tax bill statically scored at a huge loss. Revenues coming in dramatically higher than they would have budgeted revenue to come in because we created economic growth. I think this bill continues to create economic growth by leaving tax rates where they are and leaving corporates involved in this. So I think you have to understand that, like Elon's talking about the deficit, which by the way, is a big problem. But the tax bill being rolled over is equally as important, and that's what's causing the deficit. So I think we've got to separate the deficit issue and spending, because look, we decided as a country to spend a lot of money during COVID, and I don't think anyone has a problem with that. Unfortunately, when COVID ended, we never went back to pre-COVID spending levels. We continued on that trajectory. Conflating the tax bill and the COVID spending, they're two different items, and I think we have to look at them separately.
So first of all, thank you so much for being on. Do you think it got harder or easier? Because the last few days it seemed like there was some cracks in the ability to get this deal done. Where do you think we stand now?
Look, we're going to get the deal done. The question is what's in the bill. Okay, that's and look, I don't want to go down the crazy path of reconciliation, but they're using reconciliation, which means they need a simple majority in the Senate. But here's the but: the Senate and the House have to agree on the exact same piece of legislation. And that's where the issue is going to come. You know, the House put in there an increased cap on SALT deductions, state and local tax deductions. The Senate doesn't necessarily like that. I don't think that's going to end up where the House put in. There's going to be a compromise. There's going to be lots of compromises in this bill. And I think right now, in week one of the Senate legislative process, everyone's asking for their ultimate asks, and there's going to be compromise, and they're going to negotiate down from the starting point. And that's we're watching the sausage being made in some respects.
I know that you want to take the long view on this, and you want to have a cool head about it, which we admire. But we got to figure this out in terms of the impact on the markets. And so to the extent that this does make achieving an agreement on tax, rolling them over a little bit longer from here, that the deal gets messier, that the process is longer, what is the impact on the markets? How do you see that impacting the bond market?
Let me just add this one point.
Okay.
I don't think it's going to be that much longer. There's a forcing function in this whole tax legislation because we've got debt ceiling is taxed in there. So when the Secretary of Investment comes out with this X date or the date that we run out of capacity to finance ourselves, that's going to be when legislation has to happen. I always assumed that Congress would take all the time they could take to get to the legislative agenda they want. So I don't think it's going to slow down. I think we're going to go through this normal process. As far as markets are concerned, look, I think anyone who thinks that this bill is not going to get through and taxes are not going to be extended, I think they're making a miscalculation. On the flip side, I talked about the China trade deal. The China trade deal, if we actually have a China trade deal and we're going to see more normalized relationships with China, that's pretty bullish to the markets, pretty bullish to companies. And you think about the exports and the imports and the fact that we're not going to have to worry about supply chains. And we've all been talking about corporate uncertainty for the last 4 months. One of the big uncertainties has been China. if you take the China uncertainty off the table, it's clearly a good moment for markets.
Yeah, but Gary, I mean, there's no trade deal with China, right? And if you go back to the first administration, the first time we put tariffs on China in 2018, we didn't have a phase one deal until January of 2020. And you could say the stakes are much higher now. We lived through COVID. We understand the implications of disrupted supply chains. Now, throw in AI, throw in this race that we're in, which is really going to determine, I think, who wins the race between the U.S. and China over the next 100 years. They seem to be in a position where they can wait it out. I just don't think that we can say today there's a strong framework for a trade deal with China anytime soon.
Well, look, we don't know what was agreed upon today. What may have been agreed upon today is to stop fighting, for the Chinese to reinstate some of their exports of rare earths, magnets, things that we're hearing about that are in short supply. We do know, we do have the data that we do know since Liberation Day, the Chinese have been exporting less to the United States. We see the freight coming in, we see the ships coming into the ports, we know there's less coming in. So if the Chinese reinstate some of the shipments of those goods that we need that go into manufacturing, further manufacturing in the United States because they're not finished goods, that's important to the U.S. economy. It's important to manufacturing here. It helps us get what we need to get done. Just those things by themselves are stabilizing the market. Look, China needs things from us as well. We know that we export food, we export energy to China. They need food, they need energy. There are compromises to be made here. And if there's just an understanding between the two heads of state, and they invited each other to come to each other's countries, and they said they've accepted, just the thawing of the relationship is pretty positive.
So I hear you, and I appreciate the resolve and the calm on this deal's going to get done in terms of the budget and whatnot. So, as a market participant, and while you spent time in Washington, you're a markets guy. What policy initiative do you want to see for the market beyond taxes? We've made the assumption that's going to happen. You've said we've got a China deal done. Let's not challenge that. What's next? Because I feel like this administration was already getting ready to drop the next bit of candy on the market. Is there any?
Look, I don't know if there's any. I think it will take us the better part of this year to get this big, beautiful bill done.
Yeah.
I mean, this may take till August, September, depending on next date. So then we start getting into, primary season, re-election season, midterm season. This may be the hallmark piece of legislation. If you look back at administrations tend to get one piece of major legislation done in the first year. And so this will be the piece of legislation. Look, I do still think that there is a need to take on spending in the federal government. Look, this is why when I said Elon Musk was going after spending in his Doge facility, the president is going after spending. They're both right. We spend too much in this country. So ultimately, whether they can get it done in this bill or not, and maybe they can go back to regular way in the Senate, which is 60 votes, and we can eliminate some things that cost us money that maybe we don't need in this country. Maybe there's a bipartisan way to cut spending, because I think both sides of the aisle are feeling pressure on spending.
Gary, great to see you. Thank you so much for coming by.
Thank you, Pat.
Come by anytime.
Better day to have Gary Cohn. There is no better day. And again, I said it, I'll say it again. It's an absolute gentleman to be here, because I guarantee that every network in the United States is looking for this voice right now. So thank you, Gary.
Yeah, but if we had to go back to the markets, we heard your geopolitical impact speech. Get that. But in terms of the markets, what do you think they do tomorrow?
Yeah, I mean, it's not good for the markets. I mean, we were talking about uncertainty for the last 2 months, and we know what that happened, in April when we had a whole heck of a lot of it. I don't have a lot of confidence that, this call with Xi is, and I don't want to crap about anything, okay? But let's just be honest. We have enough time now. The first administration, we see how this sort of stuff goes. He's very easily flattered, but now he's very easily distracted. And I can't stress this enough. I mean, all of these conflicts of interest that Elon has, he's got pressure points right here. And, you think about China, okay, Canada and Mexico, our two largest trading partners, have not even come to the table. They haven't even talked about negotiating. You think China is going to strike a deal before the EU, Canada,
Those markets are up.
Yeah, and they're massively outperforming us. So the lens of the markets, I think that folks are kind of waiting to see what sort of deal we have with our allies before we have one with our adversary.
Could you talk about Tesla itself for 1 second?
Please.
Okay, so Tesla is right around where it was the day after the election, which is
Makes sense.
a lot's happened though. I think this is a way worse scenario right? I think that for Tesla, because when he was elected, we all, clearly Musk and Trump, there was no daylight between them at all, right? They were fast friends, and so he had every reason to hope that everything would go his way, Tesla's way. You can imagine now that scenario not playing out in a bigger way at a time when the value of Tesla is so much about robotaxi, so much about full self-driving and robots. I don't leave that aside for a minute. You can't help but feel like that is damaged, at least in the near term.
Remember what Adam Jonas of Morgan Stanley said about Tesla, the $1.1 trillion market cap. Most of it is based on businesses that basically don't exist right now. They're not commercial businesses. And to that extent, yes, Tesla's in a much worse position because who has a target now on his back? Elon Musk does. The contracts are going to be gone. The credits are going to be
which we're not going to
gone.
Yep.
The contracts in terms of Starlink, et cetera, those will be gone in theory if this really plays out the way Trump says it's going to play out.
I saw one of the fine shows today, I think it was on Power Lunch. One of the analysts, $120 price target, was talking about some of the things you're talking about. And I know on this show we talked about this recent move to 360 was a textbook 50% retracement of the all-time high and those 220 lows. But now, given this news, I'm sort of with Karen. It's not ridiculous to think we're not going to visit that 220 level.
All right, we got to get to Broadcom right now. Shares at after-hour session lows despite a revenue and earnings beat. Kate Rooney's got the numbers. Kate.
So expectations were pretty high for Broadcom heading into this print. That is part of the stock drop we saw after hours. It did pare back some of those losses, but by most measures, if you look at the chip maker and the fiscal second quarter, it did outperform, at least for the quarterly numbers. It was driven by strong AI demand. CEO Hock Tan just saying on the earnings call that momentum in the quarter, he called it robust demand for AI networking. Broadcom, of course, is a key player in this whole AI hardware ecosystem. Tan said the momentum is expected to continue into future quarters. He expects growth in AI semiconductor revenue to accelerate to $5.1 billion in Q3. That comes as their hyperscaler partners continue to invest, as he put it. EPS revenue topped expectations. Same with Q3 revenue guidance that's roughly in line at $15.8 billion. Semiconductor and infrastructure revenue also topped expectations. Back to you.
Kate, thanks. Kate Rooney. Just to put the decline after hours in context, record high close. So we started off very high on Broadcom going into the print.
Yeah, up nearly 9%, right, since the April lows. And, I think it's important to remember 90.
No, 90.
Yeah, I thought you said 90.
Extraordinary.
That's when we got back to the faithful eight, people, right? I know you guys have been dogged in with this Mag 7, but, it's over $1 trillion market cap right now. The one thing I'll just say is, here's a company that's growing earnings and sales high teens, okay? High teens. And it's trading at, 39 times or 20 times sales, that sort of thing. So I'm not sure the valuation is commensurate with the story that Hock Tan is telling. He's already given us massive targets about what custom silicon could be out to 2027. That's why the stock in December rallied 40% in 2 days. So I just think it's important to remember that this stock got cut in half from its December highs to its April lows. You could say, well, it's important to remember the stock just doubled from there. This is when things get a lot harder for investors, when you're trying to process what is in the stock right here. I think a lot is in the stock right now.
All right, we got to take a quick break right now. Guy has somewhere to go.
Yeah, I'm getting
Everybody, thank you so much. That's Gary Cohn, by the way. I had an opportunity to work for Gary Goldman Sachs. I mean, there's no more impressive person right now than him. And as I said on the live show, I'll say it here to you folks. Gary could be any show in the country right now, and he chose to be with us. He committed to it a couple months ago, and he's here. So, Gary, honest to God, thank you so much. Real quick, a couple of things. We have some really, first of all, everybody, it's so humbling that you're all here, and I mean that sincerely. Over 30 states, a couple different countries. I want to give a huge thank you and shout out to Mary Duffy and her team.